listening to the Author Inside You podcast, a weekly podcast designed to motivate you to finish writing a book, choose a publisher, and have your work build an audience. Keep listening if you're looking to get propelled into the next chapter of your life. And now, it's the Author Inside You podcast with your host, Leah and Matt Rafferty.
Hello and welcome to the Author Inside You podcast. I'm Matt Rafferty.
And I'm Leah Rafferty.
Joining us today is Joseph Wood, who's the author of Saving Joey. Joey was abandoned as a newborn in Chicago and later was adopted. He currently serves as the Washington County Judge in Arkansas, and Joseph lives in Fayetteville with his wife, daughters, and mother-in-law. Welcome, Joseph. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you guys for having me, and appreciate being invited to join you guys.
Well, we appreciate your time. Thank you. So it seems like you had a guardian angel in the beginning of your life. Can you tell us a little bit about your story and Mr. Johnson?
Mr. Caesar, sure. We had Caesar Johnson, that's his name, and somehow, we don't know, and what I've always celebrated as March 20th is my birthday. It was actually the day that I was found. I'm what you call a Foundling. The laws and things have changed in Illinois where those who are in foster care and adopted, they can get their original birth certificate. We originally got our birth certificate about 5 years ago, and I thought it would have my birth mom and birth dad's name on there, and it didn't. It said, "This is your Foundling birth certificate." Strange enough for me, I have 3 daughters and 2 grandsons, so I know what a birth certificate looks like and never heard of a Foundling.
Yeah.
So I had to do the research and find out what a foundling is, and they said that you were found, you were abandoned. That's what a foundling is, someone who was abandoned. And so that began, obviously it was a major shock, on the foundling certificate it said you were found on this day, March 20th. And again, that's the day I celebrate as my birthday, and they said, no, that was just the day you were found. And so I said, well, as I continue to read the certificate, you were received in the orphanage by this doctor, and you were found at this address by this man, Caesar Johnson. So after the initial shock of maybe 2 or 3 weeks, I finally said, well, can I find the doctor who took me and received me into the orphanage? Any kid going into an orphanage, they had to be checked out by a medical doctor. And I did the research, and I did find the medical doctor, but he had died in 1999. So again, another shocker. And so I said, well, I wonder if I can find the guy who found me. And so I did all this research and found a number of Caesar Johnsons in the state of Illinois, but started whittling it down. Anybody under 50, because that would be my age, 60, 10 years old, 70, about 20-year-olds, and most 20-year-old guys would not, I think, have any wherewithal to do something like do what he did. And so got it down to 3 names, and the very first name that I called was Caesar Johnson, and he tells the story.
Wow.
It was an amazing call. It was amazing, and I'll always remember it.
I can't even imagine it for both of you.
It was a pretty powerful piece. I was in my office, and probably right at about 10 o'clock in the afternoon, 10 o'clock in the morning, I give a call, and a lady answered the phone, and she's an older lady, and she says, may I ask who's calling? I said, well, this is Joseph Wood. I'm calling out of Little Rock, Arkansas at the time. I'm looking for a guy by the name of Caesar Johnson. He would have saved someone. He spells his name a little different. And she stopped me. She said, hold on, save somebody. She wakes up a little bit more because she sounded like most women. My husband saved somebody? Yeah, right, okay. She sounded, and I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, yeah, he does. Name different. How do you spell it? And I spelled it, and she said, that's correct. He asked me what my phone number was. Now, to know before I made any phone calls, I called my wife and said, honey, how do I get someone to take my phone number? And my wife asked why, and I said, well, because if they're shocked by anything that they hear and hang up the phone, at least they would have the telephone number to capture and maybe call back. And my wife got on me real quick. Will you just make the phone call? Stop analyzing this. You've been waiting all your life. Go just make the call. Well, I called, and she asked the question. She said, so what's your phone number? And I'm crawfishing now. why do you need my phone
Yeah.
number? And I'm quiet because I'm sitting here like, wow, she's asking for my phone number. I said, well, why do you need it? She said, well, he's almost 81 years old, and he's hard of hearing, and I may have to switch phones. And I'm
Oh,
sitting here
okay.
thinking, wow, this really may be him. And she said, what's your phone number? Because again, I'm stunned a little bit. And so I started going through my phone number. And then she stopped me and she said, hold on, did you say save somebody? I said, yes, ma'am. She said, was it a baby he saved? I said, yes, ma'am. Are you the baby he saved? I
Oh.
said, yes, ma'am. Oh, Jesus. She started praising the
Oh.
Lord and screaming and
Oh,
shouting.
wow.
I was bawling in my office. I mean, I could
Oh.
not stop crying. And
Oh.
she started screaming, Caesar, Caesar, that baby you saved, Caesar. And he comes to the phone, and I'm trying to wipe my face and stop slobbing. I mean, I was horrible. And hey, my name is Joseph Wood. I'm from down here in Little Rock. I'm giving you guys a call. I'm looking for Caesar and save somebody. And he said, hello? And I started again. She's in the background. He can't hear. And you want me to tell him? So anyway, she told him everything. He came back to the phone. He said, oh, yeah, I remember like it was yesterday, one of the coldest
Wow.
days in Chicago. I just put my wife and family to bed and getting ready to go to work. I was a night supervisor at Campbell's, the soup manufacturing plant in Chicago. And as I put on my coat and scarf and had put on my boots, we started walking down the stairs in the apartment complex. I got down to the second set near the vestibule, and there's this basket. Didn't know what it was, and and he said I took my foot to move the blanket, but the blanket moved. Realized there was a kid in there, and looking up and down the street, and carefully ran back in the house with the basket and the kid, and woke my wife up, and ended up getting my neighbors up, and eventually 3 hours later, we called the police to come in, and they searched and to ask questions, and at the end of 3 hours plus, they ended up taking you on to the orphanage, and that was it. That's the last time, and obviously we had started. So how did you find what's going on? You ever come back to Chicago? And we've been friends since.
Oh, wonderful.
So it's been a great journey. So
Well,
anyway, that's you asked for a little bit, but that's
Yeah.
pretty much how that story got.
Well, I can't even imagine how you felt to find out about your story, and also
Yes.
about how Caesar felt to hear you, and that it's just
Right.
both sides. It's just a wonderful story, both sides.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
And-
It's been amazing.
And you're
It
quite a
really has.
success.
And
Yeah,
it's
and
still
that
been, and it's still been, and it's still unfolding.
great.
If you don't mind, so I end up the first time I met him, I ended up going to Chicago probably a month after the phone call. It was October when I called, and so November was Thanksgiving. I went to Chicago to visit my dad, but in that process, the orphanages still exist in Chicago,
Oh,
except now
okay.
it's called Catholic Charities. Catholic Charities took it over as they did many, because at the times in the 70s, most orphanages in the country shut down because their Department of Human Services started taking over a lot of that process. And so the Catholic Charity said, hey, we have some information about your time when you were in the orphanage. And if you like, we would love to have you come down. It's still downtown. So I took my wife and my daughter, and we went down there, and we were amazed at what we saw and how incredibly beautiful this place was. And they have all these black and white pictures from the 40s, 50s, 60s through the 70s on the wall of kids who have been there, the police
Wow,
officers,
that's
a
neat.
number of the priests and the nun who were, and all these kids were smiling, happy. And my image of growing up for almost 40 plus years was orphanages were, torn up jeans and ragtail kids, and I was just amazed at how these kids looked. And they said that the nuns believed that these kids would never be adopted. They're going to have a great life with us, and if we want them to be adopted, then we had to present the best kids. So when people walked in, they wanted those kids. And so what we were supposed to be doing was spending an hour with them, and they still hold church services. They still feed the homeless there. You can see the big glass where kids would be behind. They don't do the kids anymore, but it's a still functioning Catholic Charities operation. And I'm just walking through there, and I'm crying again. And my kids are learning about me as I'm learning about me. That you were about a little less than 5 pounds when they brought us to you, and you looked like you were in pretty good condition considering the elements that you were found in. And it was just amazing. Well, we ended up getting to Caesar's house and spending time with him. And it was just a great kickoff to our relation. Not even a year and a half, 2 years later, he asked me to go to a family reunion of his in Greenwood, Mississippi. I said, I don't know anybody there.
Yeah, but I bet they all knew you.
Yeah.
Oh,
They knew the story,
I didn't know
right?
that. And December of 15. The reunion was January. They do it every January for 36 years. They've done it in
Wow.
celebration of the McCaskills and all. And so, which is part of his lineage and grandmother, I guess it was, who was very instrumental in the community, the church, and had 17 kids. So anyway, they
Wow.
honor her. This was the 36th year, 37th year, I can't recall, but it was in January, and they wanted me to be the keynote speaker. And I said, I don't know these people. What are you talking about?
That was
And he said,
your
we
first
do a
time
Mardi
there.
Gras. Oh, absolutely. He said we do a Mardi Gras on Friday. They do a church picnic and all on Saturday, and Sunday is a big thing at church. And then we go to a community civic center, and it's a luncheon, and you would be the speaker there. And I said, I don't know. And again, I'm still stumbling, and my wife said, hey, let's just go and do this for them. And well, December, right the month before, right after Christmas, Caesar goes into the hospital. His kidneys collapse,
Oh.
and he can't travel and all. And he calls. He said, I know this is tough. I can't go, but my family, they've been planning all this. And would you still go? And I don't know anybody there. And my wife and I said we'd just go ahead and go. And they just loved on us, just like
Aw.
Caesar and his wife
Yeah.
Ruthie did. And it was just amazing. But here's the kicker. Now, it'll circle back to what I'm saying, the relationship. Sunday, as I'm doing the presentation, and I tell them the story how I made the phone call and Ruthie answered, and she's screaming and shouting Holy Ghost in it. Everybody knows that's how Ruthie is. And so, well, anyway, they video clipped, well, before it ended, people were standing up and clapping.
Oh.
Well, there was some men who were older than me crying, and I couldn't understand what was the dynamics. And they said, wow, we used to spend our summers with Uncle Caesar, and he always told us about this kid that he found. And now you're standing in front of us. And it's just amazing for them, because it's almost like a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout and hearing the campfire stories.
Yeah.
Well, this one happened to be, it was true, and here's the person, Well, they
Yeah.
video clipped a little bit and sent it to Caesar.
Good.
And he was just so thrilled. But his wife called and she said, you don't know why I was screaming and shouting on the phone? It's because Caesar has been always running his whole life. I've been knowing this man, and he was always wondered, should he have done more for that kid? Did he make it? Did he survive? Because it was so cold. It was 8 degrees out, snow and ice.
Wow.
And for you to answer the phone and to say that you were the kid that he saved, I knew the Lord had just answered his call. And so that's why I was Holy Ghost shouting and screaming. And so anyway, it was just how full circle, how he had all ever happened. And I make the phone call, and so we've connected.
That's wonderful. I bet every day of his life he wondered what happened to you. I mean, you would
Yeah,
have to,
Yeah.
Wow.
Well,
Thank goodness
so
the birth certificate was open. Or, I'm sorry, it's not a birth certificate, or
it's well,
Foundling.
they did. That's what they did. They said birth certificates,
Okay.
but because I didn't have one, they ended up having a foundling
Okay.
certificate, if you will. Foundling birth certificate is what they call
Okay,
it.
I apologize.
So no, you're exactly right. So just an interesting piece. In fact, one of the legislators, this is an interesting piece, called me because he was one of the ones who said, I don't think we need to pass this legislation, that it was a closed adoption should be closed. It protects the people who are giving up the kid, it protects those who are adopting the kid, and there's no need to have that information out there. And the legislator who wrote it said, I am a legislator, and I have been adopted, and I can't have access to my own information. Well, Rob Blagojevich, the governor at the time who went to jail, the new governor there said, well, I do have a heart for this, and I'm going to sign off on the legislation if you can help me drive that through the rest of the legislators. And that legislator said, hey, this is Joseph Wood. I remember him. We used to travel together recruiting people around the country. He was at Western Illinois, and I was at University of Chicago recruiting MBA students.
Oh.
And he said, wow. So he apologized for being one. And again, I'm in Arkansas, but when he started doing the research and reading the newspaper articles that they did in Chicago, he said, I know this guy. And
Yeah.
so he was one to help turn it around and get other legislators to say, yes, we need to sign off on this. If you're older than, I think it was 18 or 21, you should be able to have access to information that's pertinent to you.
Wow. That's a pretty neat. You
Yeah,
have a
that
bunch
is
of neat stories.
Yes.
It's a fantastic story that you've got.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I'd say we all on a journey, and that's why we
Right.
call the book Joy's Journey, because we are all on one. Mine just happened to be an interesting start.
So how did it lead to the book? What happened?
So my kids, two of my daughters were there as we were walking around the orphanage, and then when we meant to go see Caesar, my middle and my youngest. And so again, I'm reading through the documents, we're crying, and my oldest, who couldn't get there, and she eventually went to go see him. She said, "Dad, you got to write this stuff down, because obviously you are the beginning of our tree, family tree and all." And I struggled for a couple of years trying to write, because I still don't know the beginning. I don't know how I got to the stairs, and so it's hard for me to write it. I played around. I got the title together. At the time, it was From the Steps of Caesar to the Steps of the Capitol. I was a deputy secretary of state at the state capitol here in Arkansas, and again, so that was the working title, America's Last Foundling. From the Steps of Caesar to the Steps of the Capitol, America's Last Foundling. But again, I couldn't start it because I don't know where to start. And one night, about 2 a.m, I woke up and I said, "Wow, I need to do this for my grandsons, and I can tell them as a story if I'm just talking to them." And so I came up with 3 stories: Leaving Joy, Saving Joy, and Adopting Joy. And Leaving Joy would be kind of made up, but what I believe was my mother. And so I'm imagining she was a young teen who had the kid, cried because she was happy, but cried because she knew she couldn't take care of the kid. So she grabs a blanket off her bed and a basket out of her closet and goes through the streets of Chicago and leaves him on these stairs in this apartment complex as she hides behind a tree, hoping that somebody comes out of there. And it's a neighborhood that she's maybe familiar with, and maybe she's seen him and his kids and all. As in my head, what I believe possibly could happen. And that was Leaving Joy, the story about who I believe my mother is. Saving Joy is all the story about Mr. Caesar and him putting his kids to bed and getting ready to go to work, and finds a kid and then engages his neighbors, engages the police, and then they take me off to the orphanage where I'm now safe. And then Adopting Joy is a story of the parents who, after being married for a number of years, said, "Let's go to the orphanage and adopt a girl." And they get there and they said, "No, don't want a girl, want that boy right there," and bringing me home. And the neighbors are there and the church members there, and it's around Christmas and all that type of thing. So that's Adopting Joy. And that one's already done. And so we're targeting November for that one to be released, because that'll be a National Adoption Awareness Month. So
Congratulations.
those are the 3 books. The publishers did ask that we combine Leaving Joy with Saving Joy. They thought that children reading Leaving Joy and the kid being left out in the elements, 8 degrees, snow and ice, could be kind of hard, maybe traumatic. And I go into my business thought process and marketing thought process. Well, that means they just got to go buy Saving Joy.
Yeah.
And some of the publishing company, Karis Publishing, works out of John Brown University, and they work with a number of professors. And so they talked about psychologists who were there and children. And so they said, well, if you combine Leaving Joy and Saving Joy, then it will end with a good notion that he is rescued and brought to an orphanage. And so I've combined Leaving Joy and Saving Joy, and we just called it Saving Joy.
Oh, okay.
But Adopting Joy is a separate book.
And that book is all ready to go.
Already said and done, and we're just waiting, one, to continue to generate sales of this one, but then wait for the National Adoption Awareness to kind of do that release, because then it also does kind of tie in some Christmas and the best gift of giving life, not only life, but saving life, and then going to get life and putting it on somebody else. And so Joy was given of a family, and he gave them a gift by giving them a kid and that type of thing. Which is true, which is the Adopting Joy was based on true. My mom and dad had been married for 5 years. She was a teacher, wrote in her high school yearbook, "I want to be a teacher and I want a house full of kids." She got out of high school, went on to become a teacher. 5 years, no kid, and she is pressing my dad, who was a construction worker at that time, and he hated coming home from work because she put him back to work. She wanted to get pregnant. And he was like, oh, she's driving me nuts. And so when she said, let's go adopt a kid, he was like, yes, good. And so they get me in the house, and she's relaxed, he's relaxed, and you guys know the rest of the story. She gets pregnant.
Oh, yeah, of course.
That always happens.
That just happened to a niece of ours,
Yeah.
actually, yeah.
She had my brother. A year later, she had my sister. And a year after that, she had my brother. So it was, again, the Lord said, hey, I'm going to give you the house full of kids. But just go get this one kid first. So,
Yeah.
So it's a children's book, like a book.
it is a children's book. I was going to, again, just do a lot of promo on the book to go get the second book of the series. And I was cautioned, well, it's great to do that, but what about if somebody's reading the book to the kid? They can't go out and get it. And so what about some resources? And I said, wow, that'd be great. And so I visited with some groups that I've worked with over the years, Arkansas Right to Life, the Family Council here in Arkansas, Loving Choices, Compassion House, and then The Call. The Call is a nonprofit that works with a lot of churches in the state who also works with the Department of Human Services. All of those groups are working with foster care, those who could maybe do some volunteer if they can't do the foster caring or adoption, et cetera. So we listed all of those guys. All of them wanted to be listed as a resource. So if someone is reading to their kid or grandkid and thought, man, maybe I can't adopt or I can't foster care, but I can maybe do tutoring or get involved and do something. And so that was the direction I went with having them listed as resources in the book, as opposed to, hey, go and get the second book or go and get the third book, which was really great.
Well, that's just nice that you're opening up doors for other people to see how they can help. That's pretty neat.
Yes.
Now, I have to ask, I like the illustration. What did you have a say in the illustrator, or?
Absolutely, absolutely. The Miss Teresa Cates. I had another illustrator who got really ill and was out, and so and could not really keep up and all. And I was doing some work at the Capitol, and we had a big, National Day of Prayer, and all these ministers were there in the Capitol, in the Rotunda, and they had an artist there who was painting, she was painting a flag and then was painting some figures there. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And she's doing it while the service, the whole ceremony was going on.
That's impressive.
I'm like, well, at the end of it, she had it completed. Well, it wasn't maybe a month later, I was emceeing a big program in Little Rock, and guess what? They had her there, and she was doing the exact same thing. She was painting while the program was going on, and by the time the program ended, they ended up doing an auction for the proceeds, and they took that picture to D.C. for one of the congressmen to put in his office because he was one of the sponsors of this program. And I ended up talking to her, and I said, have you ever done any book illustrations? She said, no, all I've done is, oils and painting. I got my gallery. But I only do that part-time because my full-time job, I'm a social worker for the Department of Human Services in Arkansas. And my mouth just hit the floor. I said, well, I need to visit with you. And she said, sure. I love what you did today as an MC and all. I said, well, let's get together next week. And we got together. I said, can I tell you a story? And I told her pretty much what I shared with you. And she said, I want to do it. Oh, my gosh. I don't care if you don't have any money to pay, whatever it is. I just want to do it. That is so awesome. And she come to find out that her mom used to be abused by her dad. In third or fourth grade, it would get so bad. She would go to her mom trying to stop her mom from crying and all. And her mom had to flip it. And her mom flipped it by tearing sheets of toilet paper squares and giving it to her and say, hey, baby, draw me something on here. And so she would draw. And no sooner as she did, she'd give her another one. So it would distract her from thinking about
what a neat
her.
mom.
And it was just the way. And she said she found her release by going into the arts and painting. The other piece about her drawings and paintings, Annie Lee is a pretty famous artist from the Illinois area, in particular Chicago, and she didn't get to painting until maybe in her 60s, 70s. She's passed now, maybe 4, 5, 6 years ago, somewhere in the neighborhood. But her very first painting was, I think, called Blue Monday, and she drew it without a face. And in her whole mind, when she saw the reception of that, it was because so many people can see themselves sitting on the edge of the bed. And this is what the picture was. I'll give you the image. A woman sitting on the edge of the bed, rollers in the hair, a nightgown on, drooping boobs, if you will, because she just got out of bed. But she's sitting on the bed, sitting there looking like, time to face the week, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Well, she didn't put a face on it because everyone could probably see themselves in that image, and it just took off. She continued to do renderings, whether it be a church or walking down the street in a park, a picnic, and they didn't have faces, but you can almost see your family or your kids. And so when I saw Teresa's work, I was like, wow, it just took me right back to my time growing up in Chicago. So it just all worked really well. I will say that we did have a second set where she had to go back in because, again, some of the professors were saying it may be hard for some kids not understanding why there's no face. And again, and that's in this part of the world. Up in maybe the Illinois and that Midwest, maybe a little more acceptable because if you grew up with it, you kind of grew up with it.
Right.
If you're down in this region. So we end up going back in and in some cases, and as you go through the book, you see some with faces, some without. So it kind of helps introduce them to seeing themselves in that situation. Could
Very
you be the person saving the kid? And Caesar, he has a face on some, and he has some where there's no face on it. So again, hopefully they can see themselves being the one to save the kid or be involved.
What an interesting concept. And it's, another way of learning through your book. That is really
That's
cool.
correct.
Wow.
Yep.
All right. Well, what about marketing? What have you done for marketing?
Wow. I haven't done a lot. I'll tell you, being a county judge has been keeping me relatively busy.
I believe that.
We had a couple of $1 million of damage. We had a major flood down here, and it took out about 89 roads and bridges.
Oh, wow.
And so we've been back and getting together and had FEMA in. And so it's been pretty busy. However, we're moving toward getting the Facebook all tightened up and the Instagram. We've done maybe 3 book readings. One of them was with the Arkansas Right to Life, one of the groups who did the resources, and we're working on the other listed resources to visit with them and do so they can help market and showcase. One of the bookstores in Little Rock was really keen on having us come in when they heard about the project. So that's been going on. It's an art store and a bookstore, and they have amazing art in there, and they carried some of the Annie Lee stuff from Illinois. So it's just a really good thing. We have the podcast is an interesting piece because I told my daughter's one of these tech type, if you will, and I've been talking about blogging and just really trying to get the interests of those who are considered foundlings. And you won't find a lot of people who are foundlings, I don't think. But if they have a foundling story, to feature them and have them come to the place and submit their story, I will review it and then I would post it on the blog. But maybe the podcast may be another way to kind of introduce those who are in that interesting space. Most foster kids either go back to their birth mom or birth dad or family member, and if you're adopted, you may have some trace of where you come from because of the records. The foundlings truly have no record, and again, there's no documentation. All they know, again, is, in my case, you were found on this day. We believe you were 2 to maybe 6 days old, 5, 6 days old. We just don't know. And so I'm older than probably what I am, but I still celebrate the day I was found.
Yes.
So, but anyway, so that's kind of some of the marketing piece that we're just trying to do. We're looking at libraries, getting into libraries, and then as we start moving to National Adoption Awareness Month, there's some art festivals and book festivals that we would look to do, and we're looking at doing a combo. Teresa's an illustrator. She does from time to time paint parties where she bring adults together and give them canvas and talk about certain things and then help them walk through paintings. Well, we have not done one yet, but we're looking at where I can either read to kids or even talk to adults about then foster care, adoption care. But then she turned around and then walked them through doing the painting type of thing. So it allows both of us to get into doing a dual and getting both of us exposed, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds like a great team.
Well, we're from Ohio, and Dave Thomas from Wendy's is from Ohio, and I know he does a lot with adoption.
Yes.
Well, he's passed away, but his
Foundation.
That's right. His daughter's been doing a lot.
Right.
Yep.
So maybe somehow they could have
That's
been
interesting.
helped.
You mentioned David, and I forgot that Wendy's, and so did Kathy Truitt out of Chick-fil-A. He was he really big with the adoption piece. So
really?
there's a lot of things I need to follow up with. But yes, and so Wendy's was based out of
Columbus,
Ohio. Excellent.
So if any of our listeners are foundling or want to learn more about it or just get in touch with you in any way, how would be a good way for them to contact you?
So the website would be www.joeysjourneyseries.org. Joeys, Joeys, journeyseries.org. And so they'll kind of see some of the events that we have, that we've already had, and as we have other ones, we'll put them on there. For purchasing the book, it's on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, CaresPublishing.net. And if they happen to be in Arkansas, they can get to the bookstore, Cares Publishing, Pyramid Art and Bookstore, as well as the Arkansas State Capitol gift shop. We had the books there as well.
Oh, that's nice that you have it in the Capitol.
I had a little, yes.
It pays to know people, right?
Absolutely. On the website, there is a place for people to leave a request for either us to come and speak or come and read.
Great.
In fact, I will share with this. They did a big article on Caesar and I. The Pope was to the U.S., was it maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago? He came and spent time in D.C., New York, and I think he ended up going to Illinois. Well, they do a big thing for for the Catholic Church magazine, and one of the articles that they wrote was a Foundling His Family, or Family, Faith, and the Foundling, or something like that. But they captured Caesar and I, and there was a Pulitzer Prize writer who wrote it in the Chicago Tribune.
Yes, I read it.
Did you see that?
Yes, it was a great article.
The hope was that my mom, the only reason I even wanted that was that my mom would read it and say, that's my kid. No, that never happened. But I did get a call from the writer who said that, Joseph, the number of calls that I got from moms who said, I hope my daughter has the same disposition as this guy, because I gave her away at such an early age. And, so it made me realize, again, it's not just you who's in that place, in that position. There's others, and so that kind of, again, it helped me see bigger than myself. I still don't have any clue of who she is, and I want to do what I did with Caesar: thank her and say I'm okay, and appreciate you for having me, because you could have put me in a bag and put me in the alley, but you didn't. And Caesar said that, I know you struggled growing up, and I did. Wondering why was I giving up, and was she a prostitute, or was she too young, was she too old, did somebody take the kid and she didn't, you just don't know. And every place I went to, I got back to that place where I said, well, I guess it doesn't matter, she had me. I guess it didn't matter, she had me. And I went through my whole life pretty much saying, it doesn't matter what the scenario was, it doesn't matter, she had me, and that's all I wanted to do is thank her because she had me. Well, when I finally got to know Caesar and this whole thing that I was abandoned, that really hit me hard. And he said, well, I guess she did more than had you. She loved you, because she wouldn't have left you where you could be found. She could have, and so again, just kind of puts this out there. I'll share this last piece about the book. So Leaving Joy, Saving Joy, and Adopting Joy. Teresa has already started drawings. She remembers me when I first shared with her what I wanted to do. She was so taken on the journey, and she so much wanted to do this. And she is so interested in my next set, which is to do Leaving Yioje, Saving Yioje, and Adopting Yioje, which is taking all three of the books and converting them to Africa. So as opposed to being left in the streets of Chicago, it will be left in the streets of Accra, Ghana, or in the bushes of Rwanda. 2 years ago, I've been to Africa a couple of times, and the last time I was in Ghana, I had just turned 50 years old, and they had done the research on us coming, and I had I was turning 50 while I was there. I did not want to go. I wanted to go back, in fact, and celebrate my 50th at the orphanage with my wife and kids and do a
Oh,
cake there.
okay.
And I was in Ghana, and so I was struggling with not being with my family and not being able to get to Chicago. Well, the governor that we were with, and we were there for doing a business symposium and
Okay.
spent 2 weeks there. Well, in that process, she found out it was my birthday coming up, and she had a surprise birthday party at her mansion.
Uh-huh.
I bawled, cried. I was just so, how did you know?
Uh-huh.
And I'm a crybaby if you haven't figured it out. Having 3 daughters, I think they made me that way. But
yeah.
but she said, "Why are you crying?" I said, "Well, first of all, I was not ready for this, and I really want to be back and home with my family. I want to get back to her." She said, "Wow, don't. Your story is such an inspiration to us." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She said, "In the continent of Africa, the number of kids that are abandoned and left is so many. And if they do make it out of their young years and become teens, many of them will still go ahead and commit suicide because they don't have any ties or connection to where they come from.
Oh.
And so for you to have navigated and done what you've been able to do, it's an inspiration for us. You've come back home, and so this is an inspiration for us. And so I went away thinking, man, how can I give back and encourage? And so if we can do the Joey spelled backwards is Yioje, and Yioje is like the determined leader. And so I want to do those same 3 books, but as opposed to, again, Chicago and the look of Chicago and the U.S., it'll be the look of Africa. And it's the same storyline, and hopefully some young person will see it and be encouraged and be inspired.
Wow. Congratulations. And who would think even your name spelled backwards would mean something? I mean, it's crazy.
I spent time trying to figure out what do I do, how do I do it, and what will make sense to them, and so that's what we're doing. It was, and she's already started doing drawings for us. I said, let's get through the adopting Joy first, but she is so excited about it because it introduces her to the international world. She didn't have any ties or anything to the international, and so the publisher, the guy who runs the publishing company, Karis Publishing, is actually from Nigeria.
Oh, okay.
And he's got a lot of ties and people in Ghana, and I don't know if you saw that, but for every book sale that is generated, whether it be Saving Joy or any of the other books in Karis Publishing, $1 goes to an orphanage back in Africa, in Nigeria or Ghana.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah, we had another author on, and she told us who.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's a pretty cool story.
The same story, right?
Yeah, very nice.
Very.
Well, your family must be so proud of you. Your daughters must be like, I can't, and your wife just, what a neat story. So congratulations for choosing the right path. I mean, some people with the self-doubt would choose a different path, but you have chosen to succeed, and, congratulations. That takes a lot of, guts.
Well, it's a lot of soul searching, it's a lot of praying, knees and writing, and but I think a lot of it comes down to, again, having folks around who's willing to do a little bit. I had my mom who wanted a kid so bad, and she finally got me, and so she was not going to have it any other way. And I used to thank her all the time.
Yes,
Thank you
I'm
for
sure.
coming to get me, and she would get so mad. I did everything but birth you. Stop thanking me and all, but I was grateful, and so living a life of grateful. I wanted to please her. I never wanted her to think twice about the decision that she made and wanted to take me back or anything like that. And so again, it was one of those struggling of who I come and how I identify. And you guys married and your kids you guys got young ones yet?
2 daughters, one, but they're older, and both are in college.
Yeah, both college.
But the sitting around Thanksgiving dinner table, for an example, and someone says, "Well, you chew that turkey leg like Uncle Milt." Well, everybody knows Uncle Milt, and you probably chew it like Uncle Milt. But when you say that to somebody who's adopted, well, are you just saying that because you don't have that tie? Or, Joseph, you've been married to your wife for 25 years. Oh my gosh, you guys like brothers and sisters. Well, don't say that to somebody adopted, because that may be my sister. And it's just things that most people don't think about. But for those who are adopted, and in my case, are foundling, you have no clue or anything how you tied and what goes on and how you identify. And so clearly for me, it was a true spiritual walk, and for me, and that has been a lifesaver to know that I had a pastor who used to work for me in Little Rock. He said, you are struggling with something. And he laughed and he said, don't take my laughter to be anything wrong. He said, for the most part, most people are born and they know their Father and they see them as God. Because they're big, they're strong, and as they grow, they get to know that, man, their father has issues and mistakes, and their mother calls them out on it, and then they start their spiritual journey. You went in reverse. You had God's hand on you right at the bat, and you're just on this journey trying to find your natural father, so to speak. And so he just kind of put it in a perspective, so to speak, to help me again. And this is only in the past 5 years, try to navigate through, again, still identifying and locking your arms around who you are and where you come from. Most people don't think about it because they know who they are and where they come from.
Yeah. Well, you've had quite a 5-year journey here. I gotta say thank you for writing this book. It's just unbelievable. I mean, the story that you're sharing.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing it with us. We really appreciate it.
There's a young man who did a movie called The October Baby.
Okay.
And it was a kind of a silent, what do you call it, a sleeper? It was a sleeper.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
But and it wasn't Hollywood glam, but it was a really good storyline, again, of a kid who found out they were adopted, went on the search, and did find their mom. And and I met the producer, and he is really kind of thinking, my gosh, if you never wrote a book, boy, this is something that producers will love, because it's not a story that you come along and people who are writers, man, to come up with something that creative. Well, I didn't come up with this. This is my life. You know what I mean? So that may be something down the road where it becomes something that maybe gets put into a children's film or something like that. But again, I think the larger piece is just to encourage and inspire on both sides, those who are in the care side, like your family who's got into and rolled up the sleeve and said, hey, I'm going to go and get a kid, which is, man, that's selfless to say I'm going to do something, whether it's a tutoring or to actually adopt and bring them into their home or foster care until they get a chance to go back home, or for that kid who is actually the one going through that journey and bouncing from home to home, or struggling as they grow up, I mean, on top of puberty and all, trying to figure out, who am I, where did I come from, and why did that happen, and how do I move forward, how do I go on and raise a family. I tell you, for me, I go back to the title, from the steps of Caesar to the steps of the Capitol. Now it's the steps of the courthouse. I couldn't have scripted that. I was just to have a family, man, to get married and have kids and 2 grandsons. Man, the good Lord takes me out of this world tomorrow. I know I've had a blessed life.
Right.
Well, congratulations.
It sounds like it. Yeah. Joseph, do you have any advice for people who are thinking about writing a book or in the process of writing a book? Yes.
It's 2 things. One, even if you don't know how to start, right, just put it down, just start putting it down. And again, I struggled. I think I mentioned earlier, I struggled trying to write my autobiography because I just don't know how I started. But I wrote down a title, I wrote down a few chapters, I wrote down some things that happened afterwards, but the beginning is still rough, and I haven't gone back to it. But just starting, just writing it, whether you do journaling, whether you do notes, and in fact, I think one of the easier ways to maybe do that is have someone interview you and have them tell whatever the story is that you're trying to tell, and have it recorded. Now you can go back and write it. That may be a way to kind of get it going. If you got a book in you, go ahead and do an interview and ask people to ask you questions and let you just go. And then you can kind of start taking that and putting it into writing form.
That's a great idea, because everybody has an audio recorder right in their pocket.
You're absolutely right. With their iPhone, absolutely right.
And so you can't say you don't have the tools to do that. And then
that's correct.
Yeah, that is a great idea, because you'll be amazed at how much material you come up with just by talking.
Absolutely right.
Without having to put your fingers on the keyboard. Well, thank you, Joseph, for spending the time with us tonight.
Thank you again for having me on.
And thank you for listening to the Author Inside You podcast. And if you could do us a favor, would you mind sharing our podcast with a friend?
Let them know which episode is your favorite.
And until next time,
right on.
Thank you for listening to the Author Inside You podcast with your host, Leah and Matt Rafferty.